Who are the Ad Watchers? We are attorneys at the National Advertising Division of BBB National Programs, a team with over 50 years of experience investigating and resolving disputes over the accuracy of national advertising campaigns.
We don't just take ads at face value, we put them to the test. Why? Because advertising law can be simple, but it's the execution that's hard.
Welcome to the Ad Watchers, NAD's podcast that gives a view into how our organization reviews claims and applies advertising law. If you missed any of our previous episodes, don't forget to check them out later. They're available wherever you're listening to this.
It's our third episode of Season 5, and we're switching gears to focus on a sister organization at BBB National Programs.
That's right, Annie. We have a very esteemed guest today in the world of advertising self-regulation, and that is our colleague, Howard Smith, the Executive Director of the Center for Industry Self-Regulation, or CISR as it goes by. We've had the pleasure of working with Howard as he has worked on NAD cases with us, as he was also at the same time the Deputy Director of a longtime program at BBB National Programs, the Direct Selling Self-Regulatory Council, the DSSRC.
Welcome, Howard. We're so happy to have you join us today. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Great to be with you both, Annie and Eric. My background, I started in private practice. Private practice for a number of years, primarily initially as a commercial litigator. In the state and federal courts of New York. And then over time, developed a subspecialty in advertising law, which is where I was really first exposed to the whole notion of self-regulation as a concept. And it was when a client came in, it was JP Morgan Chase, and they had a TV commercial that was airing about a competing credit card product. And they thought that the messages conveyed in that ad were false and misleading, and they wanted it taken off the air. And of course, I was a litigator, so it's the old saying that when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I assume, we're going to go to court and get this remedied there. Of course, the commercial would have long since been off the air by the time we were not even done with document discovery. And so we ended up going to NAD. That was my first exposure to the National Advertising Division, and saw that it was a really useful form. It was nimble. It was efficient. We had subject matter experts weighing in on the case, and it was really eye-opening for me because it just showed that there was a whole other system out there for resolving these types of disputes. And so with that, I took on a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, number of NAD cases and kind of made it a subspecialty of my practice area. It became a real passion of mine. And so then I guess it was 2019, about 6.5 years ago, as Eric mentioned, I came over and helped launch a similar initiative directed at the direct selling space. So again, it was advertising claim substantiation, but with a particular nuance of that direct selling world where you have Salesforce members that are out there disseminating their own advertising messages on things like social media. One of you mentioned, I had the opportunity to work on a number of NAD cases as well. And then late last year, had the opportunity to come over and head up CISR, which is been doing since late last year.
So let's talk about CISR, the Center for Industry Self-Regulation, CISR. We're throwing a lot of acronyms out at everyone today. But I was hoping you could give the audience a sense of what is CISR exactly.
So CISR was founded in 2020, and it is the 501c3 nonprofit that was created by BBB National Programs. And maybe most of the listeners probably know if they're listening to the Ad Watchers podcast, but BBB National Programs is, the umbrella organization that houses about 20 different self-regulatory initiatives. But the thought was to create this nonprofit to really harness the historic power of self-regulation. We sometimes call it soft law, but self-regulation to empower business accountability. It really, BBB National Programs has been around for over 50 years with this long tradition of fostering consumer trust and being a place where self-regulation can emerge as a viable alternative, something that really bridges the gap between internal corporate compliance and sort of formal government regulation. And so it was with that kind of vision that CISR was created to advance the concept of self-regulation. Regulation is really a critical piece of business accountability. And I think people hear self-regulation and they sometimes think it's just, well, that's completely an alternative to government regulation. It's not always the case, right? Self-regulation can complement formal oversight, but it does allow industries to set high standards and voluntarily address kind of emerging issues, particularly when you're thinking like the tech space where technology is moving faster than the regulators can keep up. So we hope that CISR will provide really kind of an infrastructure for responsible business leadership. And we like to think that we're going to help educate future lawyers, policymakers, et cetera, about what self-regulation can do, and also study the conditions in which self-regulation can thrive and when it doesn't. So we commission academic research. We think about incubating new self-regulatory initiatives. And we also are rolling out an educational initiative where we're teaching law students, business students, and ultimately public policy students about what self-regulation can do.
So what is your role, Howard?
So I'm the executive director. We're a pretty small and nimble team, but my role is really to be both strategic and sort of hands-on. So it's to think about our vision for what self-regulation can do, where it can bridge those gaps that I mentioned, and think about how we can be responsive to real-world needs, particularly as we think of like things like AI and the tech space that I mentioned are moving so quickly. But I mean, so on any given day, I could be doing anything from reviewing one of our commission research papers to thinking about a new white paper initiative we might do on a particular industry sector that's engaging in self-regulation, or looking at our educational curriculum. We are piloting this course at a law school, which just finished this past semester, and we're trying to get other law schools, business schools, and policy schools to consider teaching self-regulation, because it's a real gap in the curriculum. And we're really thrilled that we've had an opportunity to pilot that course and to now take that course offering and showcase it to other institutions, scholars, in hopes that they will adopt it. And we were fortunate enough to receive a multi-year grant to develop this educational curriculum. We partnered with Arizona State University School of Law. Professor Gary Marchant taught the course this past semester. It was a full 2-credit law school class for second and third year law students, 15 weeks, and it's a very robust curriculum. And we're going to be featuring it on our website so that other scholars can come look at it. We'll have a full course syllabus, readings, PowerPoints, and the like. And we hope that other schools will adopt it, at least in part, right? And some institutions may want to teach a very similar course, and maybe other scholars will find bits and pieces that they can kind of segue into existing courses like administrative law or trademark, antitrust, those types of things. So it was a really, the feedback on the course was overwhelmingly positive. I had a chance to read all the post-class surveys that the students filled out. I had a chance to go out there and guest lecture. They were a very engaged group. I think we had 18 students in the class. And so it's something we're really excited about, and hope to be expanding that to other institutions, and ultimately to get it to go from law school to business and public policy schools.
I think that's a really terrific initiative to be proud of. I remember coming out of school and not having much of an exposure to the substance of the law that we deal with at BBB national programs, let alone learning about self-regulation and what that means. So I think it's really a worthwhile initiative to introduce the students to the concept of soft law and what we do. And it's really heartening to hear that you're getting positive feedback from the students.
So I'm curious because you mentioned, developing curricula for, business schools and policy schools. There are undergraduate programs that have advertising programs. So I'm wondering if there's any kind of feedback from those schools that uh, and their courses that inform the curricula that you're developing for other schools.
Well, I would say that we've already informally had a good bit of dialogue with some of the undergraduate institutions that might want to consider similar type curriculum. I have to be adopted, obviously, to be for undergraduate versus, say, law school, et cetera. But yes, there are a number of undergrad courses where this type of curriculum could be adapted as well.
So in the course, can you give us an example of any case studies or anything we may have discussed on the Ad Watchers here from NAD that may have been the subject of one of those courses?
Oh, well, I could tell you that, for example, I mentioned I did a guest lecture, and I talked a bit about some of NAD's cases. I think I used a couple of your Super Bowl commercials going back to when Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski had the conversation that was muffled, and Gronk was left with a misimpression that he should come out of retirement and go play football in Tampa. And of course, the students love that because it's something they could really get tangible. Ran during the Super Bowl. It's got celebrities in it and whatnot. So I used a few different examples from the NAD world. And also, in part, that was to set up a bit of a case study on my work at DSSRC. But DSSRC, of course, founded in 2019, really, like a lot of the programs in the advertising self-regulatory space, it really stands kind of on the shoulders and in the tradition of NAD, which has this long, 50 plus year history. So I was giving the students a bit of the context about how self-regulation started, going back to the late 1960s when Ralph Nader and his gang of consumer advocate students, Nader's Raiders, went to Capitol Hill and were insisting on reform. And so that led to the large, the free big trade associations to partner with then the Council of Better Business Bureaus to found what later became the National Advertising Division.
So it sounds like you have a very thorough and ambitious agenda. Are there any other goals you want to highlight for us at CISR?
Yes, we have a lot of ambitious goals. You're right. The first, I think, is to educate and empower, as I mentioned, the next generation of leaders, but also current policymakers to know that, you think about things like, I keep coming back to AI, but you think of privacy, AI, a lot of these very emerging technologies that move so quickly, and the formal legislature, the Congress and the courts, they're just not really equipped to keep up with them. So we do want to educate the public about that self-regulation is an alternative. We want to equip businesses and industries to think about it as well. So we think like trade associations that can establish best practices, establish standards, and really just shape the dialogue around innovation and accountability. And that's really one of the areas that I think is most interesting because, we're living in this crazy time of technological change. And, actually last year we commissioned a research paper by a law professor. He called it the pacing problem, which is there's just no way for our existing infrastructure of courts and legislatures to keep up with it. And so in many ways, industry is going to be best suited to find these types of solutions that we're, for these things that we're confronting right now. And, one thing that I keep in my conversations with folks is, that this is actually a big moment for self-regulation. And you say, well, why? And, I was at a number of conferences this year, and the overarching theme, for example, is at a conference of law school professors. And, the overarching theme was that we're in this deregulatory state right now. And we are going to be in that for at least the next, almost 3.5, 4 years. And regardless of, what the, who's in charge of the executive branch, you have things like the end of Chevron deference and sort of the you have the rescission of the administrative state. So it's really an opportunity for businesses to step up and to show that they can really fill those gaps. And, a lot of industries don't necessarily always like formal regulation. So I would say the next 3.5, 4 years is an opportunity for them to kind of put their money where their mouth is and show that, like, hey, we can get ahead of some of these things regardless of what's going on at the executive and judiciary branches.
Are you also partnering with other trade associations in the advertising space?
So I don't know if I'd say formally partnering, but we are in constant, we're having constant communications and discussions with trade associations, companies that are in everything from the AI space to privacy to looking at issues like connected cars. I mean, there's just so many different emerging technologies, and probably in any given week, we're having conversations with 3 or 4 different either trade associations or companies about either setting standards or possible self-regulatory initiatives. And we're always thinking about ways to incubate new ideas and new programs through CISR. That's one of the things that we would like to do is there is a emerging space where it looks like a self-regulatory initiative makes sense, is to pilot it and test it out. And that's one of the things that CISR is here, is to be that incubator so that we can try these things out and see if it works.
So we're recording this springtime 2025. Is there anything that the listeners out there should be looking out for from CISR in the coming months?
Sure. I think a couple things. One is, I mentioned that we every year we commission academic research, and it's really for scholars to look at what works, what doesn't work, what are the conditions in which self-regulation can thrive. And so to that end, we will be putting out a call for research papers in the near future, and we will invite scholars to present ideas, and we'll ultimately accept a certain number of those and commission papers for 2026. We've got a number of the papers that we commissioned last year that are now, I'm seeing drafts come in, and they'll be, in law reviews and similar type scholarly journals. So that's one thing. And the other is that every year we do an annual summit. We call it the Soft Law Summit, and that is going to be October 7th. It's going to be hosted by the George Washington University School of Public Policy. And that'll be a full day of panels, keynotes, some of our scholars presenting their research on just a host of issues in the self-regulatory world. So things like AI. We've got a case study on high-risk industries and how they've taken self-regulatory initiatives for things like safety in the railroad industry, for example. So we have a number of really, really great, compelling speakers at that event. Again, that's October 7th at George Washington. It is free to the public. So if anyone out there is interested or knows folks that want to come and hear a full day of dialogue about the emerging issues of the day, that's again October 7th. That's our Soft Law Summit. So I hope folks will come join us. And I should mention, because we're at a public policy school, it's also going to be open to graduate students, because George Washington is going to have a public policy school, law school, etc. And so we do hope that students will come. And I mentioned our curriculum. One of the panels at the Soft Law Summit is going to be Professor Marchant, who piloted that course. We may have some students there as well, and we're going to have a whole discussion about that and how we can see that curriculum, being adopted by other institutions.
Well, thank you so much, Howard. Really appreciate hearing about CISR and on all the really good work that you're doing to advance industry self-regulation. What's the best way to engage with CISR?
Sure. I guess there's a number of ways that the folks can engage with our organization. The first is, I mentioned that we commission research, right? So one is to help us identify topics for research. What are industries that are facing challenges where self-regulation could be a solution or an alternative, helping us identify those topics for case studies, white papers, and the like. That's one way. I mentioned the curriculum. Anyone who's listening to this podcast, if you're, an advertising lawyer and you're connected to academics or institutions that potentially teach areas like advertising law or anything connected to soft law, please connect us to those academics. We would love to share our curriculum with them and to see if they would be interested in adopting a portion of that into their current scholarship. Also, ideas for program incubation. I mean, that's kind of an idea of CISR, is to be this sort of laboratory experiment where we can help think about incubating new programs. And so as folks are out there in the world, whether it's a trade association, whether it's a company or an industry grappling with certain problems, and thinking about where a self-regulatory solution or program might make sense, would love to hear those ideas and start kicking the tires on how we could start incubating a new program. Attending our summit, I mentioned that, October 7th at George Washington, and then just going to our website and signing up and getting more information from us and getting our, following us on LinkedIn and the like. Those would be the best ways to engage with CISR.
So, Howard, we enjoyed hearing about your work at CISR. We know you're a leader in the world of self-regulation and a guy with excellent taste in baseball teams.
Let's go Mets.
But we also learned that you're a terrific podcast guest. So before you leave us, any final thoughts?
I guess just final thoughts to bring it back with kind of where I started, which is, a lot of the discourse that you hear out there in the world, in the legal world, is about how we're in this deregulatory state. That is, we have an administration that's talking about, repealing 10 regulations for every new one that they put on the books. And we've heard some of the agencies talk about how they're ceasing rulemaking. I mentioned the Loper-Bright decision and the end of Chevron deference, which is where the courts used to have to defer to the administrative agencies and how they interpret their charge under the law. They no longer have to do so. All of those things combined add to this environment we're in, and we're going to be in for the foreseeable future, where areas where there used to be more formal regulation, that's just not going to exist. There's going to be a vacuum, and that is both a challenge and an opportunity for businesses and industries. Big business is, according to Gallup, has the lowest reputational score it's had since they started asking the question in 1973. A full 52% of folks surveyed do not believe that industries can be trusted to regulate themselves. And yet here we are in this environment where there's going to be much less formal regulation. And so I come back to what I said earlier. This is an opportunity for business to kind of, put their money where their mouth is, or whatever the phrase is, but to step up and to really bridge those gaps and to show that they can proactively look for solutions, again, that maybe are somewhere between internal corporate compliance and formal government regulation. So I think this is it's a challenge, but an opportunity for industries out there to really think about how they can act proactively to address challenges in a way that fosters consumer trust.
Thank you, Howard. It's been great hearing all about your important work. So I think you really covered some of the takeaways that we have, but I think certainly the idea that there is an opportunity for more industries to potentially self-regulate through CISR, using it as an incubator, is in this deregulatory time, is very important, and I think it will certainly lead to potentially increasing consumer trust in advertising.
Well, just going back to how to engage with CISR, I assume in the show notes someone can list my email. Anybody listening want to have conversation about anything, I love to chat, so love to brainstorm, reach out. We're easy to find. We're always happy to chat.
Thank you for joining us, Howard.
Thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks again for tuning into Ad Watchers. Be sure to check out our previous episodes at accountabilitystudio.org, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe to get notified about our next episode.